All right, everybody, welcome back to Vuln Vibes. Glad to have you back with us.
Good to be back.
We like to keep our finger on the pulse of, all things cyber. And that means digging into those vulnerabilities that could, really shake things up.
Yeah,
And today we've got one
we do.
that definitely fits that bill.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about Exim. Now,
Yeah.
for those who might not be familiar, Exim is a mail transfer agent.
Right.
It's used super widely, especially on Unix-like systems, so you can imagine the potential reach here.
That's a big one.
And what's got everyone buzzing is this newly discovered SQL injection vulnerability.
Yep, CVE-2025-26794 to be exact.
Oh, I love it when you get all, official on me.
Got to be precise.
Got to be precise. But seriously, folks, this one's got a CVSS score of 7.5.
That's high-risk territory.
High risk.
No doubt about it.
So let's break it down a bit. For our listeners, they're all pros in the IT security world.
Yeah, we've got a sharp audience.
But sometimes it's good to revisit the basics, right?
Absolutely.
So why is Exim such a big deal anyway?
Well, think about it. Email is the lifeblood of so many organizations.
No.
I mean, internal communication, customer outreach, all sorts of critical stuff runs on email. And Exim, well, it's the engine that keeps a lot of that mail flowing.
So if Exim goes down...
You're talking potential disruption on a pretty massive scale.
Okay, so we've established Exim is a big deal.
Big deal.
And this vulnerability is no joke. But how does this thing actually work?
All right, so let's get a little technical here.
Love it.
So this vulnerability, it specifically targets Exim version 4.98.
Okay.
And it hinges on a few key conditions.
All right, lay it on me.
First, the system has to be built with this use SQLite option.
Okay, so a specific build configuration.
Right.
Got it.
Then you need ETRN enabled in the runtime configuration.
Now, ETRN, that's the extended return notification feature, right?
Bingo. And lastly, the SumTP to serialize setting has to be turned on.
And isn't that usually on by default?
It is most of the time.
So essentially, you've got a pretty common setup.
You do.
That could be vulnerable to this.
Yeah, and here's where it gets interesting. Attackers can actually use tools to scan for systems that meet these specific criteria.
Oh, so they're actively looking for these vulnerable setups.
They are.
So now we've got the stage set right. Vulnerable Exim installations, attackers on the prowl. What happens when they actually exploit this thing?
Well, that's when things can get really nasty. Remember how we talked about Exim handling all this sensitive information? Well, this vulnerability gives attackers a way to directly access the Exim database.
Oh, no.
Think user credentials, email content, all of that potentially up for grabs.
That's a data breach waiting to happen.
It is. And even worse, they can potentially modify or even delete data.
So not just stealing information, but messing with it, too.
Exactly. And imagine the chaos if they disrupt the mail server itself.
Yeah, no email, no communication, everything grinds to a halt.
You got it. And that's not even the whole story.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. See, this SQL injection vulnerability, it can act like a stepping stone.
A stepping stone.
Yeah, think of it as a way for attackers to gain a foothold. They get into the Exim database, then use that access to pivot to other systems within the network.
So it's not just about the email anymore.
It can be much bigger than that. It's all about those attack chains, right?
Oh, yeah. Our listeners know all about those. So it's like one vulnerability leads to another, leads to another.
Precisely. And before you know it, they're deep inside the network.
That's scary stuff.
Yeah, it's a serious threat.
Now, there's another wrinkle to this story. The researcher who found this vulnerability, Oscar Bataille, he decided to publish the technical details.
Yep, he went full transparency.
Now, on one hand, that's great.
It is.
It lets security teams understand the threat and patch quickly.
Right.
But on the other hand,
it also gives the attackers a roadmap.
Like a how-to guide for exploiting the vulnerability.
Exactly.
So it becomes this race against time.
Patch before the bad guys exploit it.
It's a tough situation.
It is.
But speaking of patches, the good news is that Exim did release version 4.98.1.
To address this vulnerability,
so if you're running Exim out there, you know what to do.
Upgrade time.
Upgrade.
Get those systems patched ASAP.
Don't wait around for this one, folks. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But I think the big takeaway is this Exim vulnerability is serious business.
Couldn't agree more.
It highlights how seemingly small configuration choices can have massive security implications.
And how crucial it is to stay on top of patching.
Absolutely. But it also raises a bigger question.
Oh, yeah?
How can we as security professionals be more proactive? How can we identify and address these kinds of vulnerabilities before they're even publicly disclosed?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. It's not enough to just react anymore.
Nope.
We need to be thinking ahead.
Anticipating threats.
Being proactive, not just reactive.
Exactly.
That's the future of cybersecurity right there.
It is.
So, food for thought for all our listeners out there. And in the meantime, stay vigilant, keep those systems updated, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Vuln Vibes.